see why it would be a genuine concern of his. Do you remember her saying anything about creative control?
Eric Bischoff recently went on his 83 Weeks podcast to talk about Hulk Hogan's creative control in TNA, and also more of an in-depth look about the vision or lack of vision Dixie Carter and people running TNA had for the company. Let's see what Eazy-E has to say.
You know, when you guys start winding down the meeting and they're sort of laying out the vision, I mean, is there a handshake understanding that we're going to do business together, or is it more, hey, we're going to wait and see what the offers look like and see if we can put together a deal? How do we adjourn the meeting?
On a very positive note, I mean, we left there knowing that there was probably going to be an offer that Hulk would feel comfortable accepting. It was almost like a foregone conclusion. No, we weren't ready to sign on the dotted line until we worked out. There was a lot of details to work out in terms of availability, his schedule, what he couldn't do in the ring, and all that kind of stuff. There were a lot of terms that had to be dealt with. But we felt confident just based on the vibe and the energy in the room that it was unlikely that we weren't going to get an offer that we would probably be interested in. It was very positive. And that sounds clinical, the way I just described it. We weren't high-fiving in the car on the way home, but kind of, sort of, you know, in a way.
You had optimism. You were hopeful.
Yeah.
Do you recall, was there a key word or phrase that Dixie was trying to hammer home about her vision that really turned Hulk's head? Like, oh, that's exciting. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't happen. But did she lay out what her goal for TNA was? Was there something that you remember that really stands out? Like, I remember this was important to Dixie, and boy, she really hammered Hulk with this.
No, there really wasn't. And I think, you know, looking back, that's probably one of the reasons why TNA ended up where TNA ended up, is because there wasn't a clear vision. I don't know if anybody ever had what I would consider a vision for the company. There was a lot of desire to be in the wrestling business. There was a desire to make an income from the wrestling business. I don't want to speak for Dixie, but I got the impression it was more about accomplishing something than it was financial.
I read Eric Bischoff's newest book, Grateful, and he brought that up in there when he talked about his TNA run, that, yeah, there was clearly a lack of vision for the company, which is why it was kind of all over the place, because there wasn't a clear direction. Eric Bischoff wanted to take them in this direction, but they wanted to kind of commit, but not really, and that's why ultimately it didn't work out.
I don't think there was I want to build $100 million a year company, or I want to build a company that has not only weekly television, but I want to be doing at least 120 dates a year on tour. I want to create a licensing and merchandising mega machine. There was nothing other than, we're excited about being in the wrestling business and making you a part of it, Hulk. No, to answer your question, there was never a specific goal or vision or target even, other than general. You know, we want to increase our sponsorships. We want to increase our licensing and merchandising, you know, all that kind of stuff. But those things are obvious. But there was nobody ever said, here's the vision for TNA. We think we can do this within 5 years or 3 years. Here are our next steps, and we'd like to have you on board to do it. I don't think it existed internally or certainly in the conversation that we had.
I know I'm going to get in the weeds with this question, but from a sales perspective, because that's what this is, it's a sales meeting. They're trying to sell you on coming to work for Dixie Carter and TNA. They're trying to sell Dixie, or trying to sell Eric and Hogan on coming and joining the team. So I can't help but ask sales related questions. You know, when you go back and you think about that meeting, I'm trying to figure out what the objections might be. And just to explain what I mean, because I realize not everybody listening to this is familiar with that term. If you're making a presentation and someone says, yeah, but what about this? I would consider that an objection. Like, I hear what you're saying, but whatever comes after the comma is usually the objection. And I think in a sales process back and forth, the best time to come to address an objection isn't once it comes up, it's preemptively. I would rather just hit it head on so they're more receptive. So they start their meeting not like this with their arms folded. And if they are, then maybe by the end, they're a little more receptive and we're having a conversation. And it does feel like preemptively, one of the things I would say if I were Dixie making this pitch is I would throw out a phrase, and I know that this gets associated with him a lot in a negative way. I'm not suggesting that was the way it was presented, but I do see why it would be a genuine concern of his. Do you remember her saying anything about creative control, or perhaps even using different words than that? But the gist being, we understand you need to manage your IP, that you've spent decades, your life's work building this perception of the way the Hulk Hogan character and persona is presented. And we're asking you if you will lend us your credibility to help build our company, or certainly get it to the next level. So it does feel like there has to be some trust about the way that character would be handled. I think that is a very valid and genuine concern, but I realize the internet wrestling community gets all up in arms when you call that creative control because
Yeah. I mean, I know Eric Bischoff has gone on and even in his book said, oh, he never once used creative control. I want to press X to doubt that, but hey, I wasn't there. I don't have definitive proof that he used creative control. But no, I get why Hogan would want creative control because, yeah, you build up this brand. Hulk Hogan was that's why he didn't want a job to just anybody. It's because he's very careful with his brand. That's his moneymaker is the Hulk Hogan persona and brand. So it is understandable. But it's still funny to make fun of it and call it the, well, that doesn't work for me, brother, clause. So did they have a that doesn't work for me, brother, clause? Let's see what Eric Bischoff says.
it's a buzzword. I'm not saying that from a negative perspective, but I am saying if I were Dixie, I would have hit that head on. Because if I think that's a concern, I need to put him at ease there. What can you share with us, if anything, about creative control, even if we weren't using that exact phrase?
Well, it certainly wasn't addressed in the first meeting. By the time we started exchanging drafts of agreements, our attorney, Hulk's attorney, made that very clear that Hulk would have creative control. So what Dixie did not ever bring it up, at least not in the initial meeting. By the time she saw the legal term creative control as it was defined in the agreement was in our probably response to their first draft. And honestly, it never came up again. It was, wow. I think she knew. I think Jeff knew. Again, you got to understand the context, the circumstances. Even though Hulk didn't carry a grudge and respected Jeff, and I think genuinely liked Jeff as a person, there was still that incident in WCW that involved Vince Russo, who, by the way, was writing for TNA. So when we let the world know, or in this case, Dixie and her attorney, that creative control was something that was non-negotiable, nobody attempted to negotiate it. So she didn't preemptively address it. Once we put it in an agreement, it never came up again. It was never discussed.
Do you remember, and again, we're getting super granular here, and I know I'm probably boring some of our listeners, but do you remember, was there ever a discussion about equity? Was there ever a discussion that, hey, if you can help us get to this point, then we'll cut you in? And before people laugh at that, I want to remind you, at this point, we're like less than 10 years removed from WWE going public. And that's when Vince McMahon was no longer a millionaire, and now he was a billionaire with a B. It's a big opportunity to think big like that. And certainly that's why everybody would have been thinking once upon a time is, hey man, follow the leader. Here's what success in this industry looks like. And along the way, that meant if you're publicly traded, well, lots of people own part of your company. Was the equity discussion ever even broached with you and Hulk about TNA?
Never. And again, this is going to sound negative. Apologize in advance, but I'm giving you my read, my perception at the time, and I think probably turned out to be very accurate. Going back to vision, what you were just suggesting, equity, perhaps going public, thinking about what's referred to in the business as an exit strategy and what those options may look like. All of those are the types of conversations and processes one would go through while developing the vision for your company. Because vision is more than just, I want to be the biggest wrestling company in the world. Okay, cool. How are you going to get there? That's the vision, right? So let's talk about how we get there. I don't think there was ever a vision for TNA to be anything other than a self-sustaining wrestling company that Dixie could run. At all. So there was it never brought up. There was never any conversations afterwards about how do we really build this company. No, let me take that back. I said it wrong. Sure, Dixie and myself and Hulk and Jason Hervey, because I brought Jason into the deal. Jason and I were partners, and when I'm partners with somebody, I'm partners with somebody. And when it became clear that if Hulk was going to come, I was coming with him, and it was time to write my contract, and I was the executive producer eventually on my second contract.
Right.
I made it clear that if I'm going to invest my time in this, then Jason Hervey, who is my partner, will also be a part of this. That's just how we operated. 6 months after we were all on board, a year after we were all on board, and we're having fun and things are going well, we would go out. Typically, Dixie and I and Jason, sometimes Hulk, not all the time, we would all go over to the Palms bar at the Hard Rock Hotel in Orlando, because that's where we stayed when we were there for production. And, we'd have a couple bottles of wine and, decompress, talk about what happened that night and maybe what's going to happen next week. It was a very positive, fun vibe. And sure, in those situations, we talked about what if, what if we did this? Or you think it's possible we could do this? And Dixie was generally always very positive and optimistic about those conversations, but it became very clear later on that it didn't really matter. She wasn't really running the company. She was the face of the company, and she was active day to day. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to make it sound like she was sitting in her room, playing crossword puzzles in her office. She was active, but the real decisions, the financial decisions, those were not being made really by Dixie. Not on a major level. So that became very clear and quite frustrating, honestly, because I'm getting ahead of myself here, but after a couple of years of creating opportunities, building certain things, to get just stiff-armed on any form of growth, at that point I said, okay, this is not the place where I want to be. They're very content to have the television show on Spike, to not really tour, to not really do licensing. They paid lip service to it. They brought Hulk in to help accomplish it, but there was no real effort put into any of those things because there never was a vision for that company.
Wow, that's very fascinating. I mean, like I said, I already read about some of this in his book and stuff, but I don't know, I guess it just causes me to reflect a little bit about, when I ran the IWL a little bit, like I did have a goal. I did want the IWL to become huge, but I never took any steps to really, I never went about taking the steps that I needed to take in order to get it there. It was very similar to what I feel like Eric's kind of saying about Dixie Carter. But, a lot of people, they blame Eric Bischoff and say that Eric, him and Hulk Hogan, they crashed TNA. And yeah, I think there's a little bit of truth there. But at the end of the day, they did also try to take them to bigger heights. Like, it was because of Bischoff that he wanted to take TNA to tour more and like bigger arenas, take them out of the soundstage, take them to arenas and stuff, and I want to say it was his decision to have them go against Monday Night Raw as well. But he wanted to do it differently. He didn't just want to put them out there right away. Like, I believe that they did a soft launch that went off in January, and they were supposed to wait, I think, longer before going to head-to-head, like a few more months. But I don't know if it was Spike TV or Dixie Carter, I don't know. Someone made the decision that no, we're going to do this faster. And that's partially the reason why that didn't work out. It's because there wasn't really any plan. It was just, we're going to do this and we're going to do it quickly. And maybe if there was better planning, maybe if there was better vision, TNA would probably be bigger than it was. But like Bischoff said, you know, when there's no vision, when there's no clear pathway to get to that vision, even if there was a vision, it just doesn't work out. So this was an interesting look into what Eric Bischoff had to say. What do you guys think? Sound off in the comment section below. Subscribe to my channel if you enjoy content like this. And if you do enjoy content like this, I got a whole bunch more goodies for you on the screen for you to click on and enjoy.